Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Uniting for Workplace Equity. This is a partnered effort between the Employee Rights Center and the Kim Center for Social Balance. I'm Dr. Hei-ock Kim, Executive Director of the Kim Center. We're a nonprofit dedicated to accelerating workplace equity for all employees through data-driven collaborative effort. We're grateful to ERC for hosting this series, and with me is their director, Alor Calderon.
I think that's a cue for me. Hi, everybody. Thanks everybody for being here. The episodes continue, the discussion continues. It's great to have a great panel of this great, leaders, community leaders, women who are showing us, how much more we can do if we are really inclusive and we really understand all the talent that is there. And so we are very happy to be here, very happy to be supporter of the Kim Center's work, and hopefully you'll have a great discussion today.
Thank you so much, Alor. You said it. So women still, unfortunately, have second class status in the workplace and society. As a result, we live in a culture that normalizes lower representation, respect, and reward for women than for men. Women at multiple intersections of identity are particularly vulnerable to discrimination. And yet, it's a universal fact demonstrated by research that the health and well-being of every single person on this planet is tied to the success of the women in their communities. The Kim Center is piloting a historic initiative called LEAPS in San Diego to unite community stakeholders around collaborative change. We will then take LEAPS once the pilot is complete and repeat it throughout the nation in other regions in order to drive global evolution. Today, we're demonstrating a piece of how that works by asking community representatives to share their insights into the daily experiences and needs of workers, in this case, who are immigrants and/or refugees, particularly women. Just for some background, about a quarter of San Diego's population are immigrants. They have more than $16 billion in spending power. And in San Diego City alone, there are over 60,000 immigrant entrepreneurs. Furthermore, San Diego is home to one of the largest refugee populations in the US. Now, I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists. Dr. Rasha Roshdy immigrated to the US. Did I say that right? Okay, close enough, right? She immigrated to the US in 1996 from Egypt. She worked for the US federal government for 11 years in several leadership positions. In 2020, Rasha founded the nonprofit Amna Sanctuary to help immigrants, refugees, and immigrant low-income families. She's received the Collective Resilience Advocate Award by Rise San Diego and was selected as one of 4 remarkable women of San Diego by the local Fox Network channel in April 2022. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Roshdy.
Thank you for having me.
Major Mariela Pena is originally from Nicaragua and enlisted into selected Marine Corps reserves in 1995. She's currently assigned to 1st Marine Logistics Group in Camp Pendleton in California. Mariela has received the Meritorious Service Medal, Navy Marine Corps Commendation Medal with 3 gold stars, Lieu of 4th Award, Navy Marine Corps Achievement Medal with Gold Star Lieu of 2nd Award, the Korean Service Medal, and a Combat Action Ribbon. Thank you for being here, Major Pena.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
As you can tell, we have some very accomplished people. Renee Nassori is the Career Services Supervisor with Grossmont College. Born in Iraq, she's an active community member in East San Diego and works closely with diverse individuals. Renee has spent 15 plus years in higher education and social services management. She has received the State of California Senate Award for Outstanding Community Service and was awarded the LIFT Leadership Institute of Tomorrow through California State University Fullerton College of Education. Thanks for being here, Renee.
Thank you so much.
And then Vivi Lin. Vivi Lin is the first East Asian American woman appointed as CEO of a professional arena football team, the San Diego Strikeforce IFL. She is passionate about combining winning on the field with service to the local community through youth programs and aligned business goals. Vivi also has extensive expertise creating and delivering programming through wireless applications and online platforms for professional athletes and executive management. Thank you for being here, Vivi.
Thank you for having me.
For those of you audience members who are just joining us, we're talking with community experts about the daily experiences and needs of immigrants and refugees working in the US. I invite you to add your questions to the chat and we'll address them at the end. Okay, diving in. My first question is for Vivi. The experiences of immigrant workers and their families is positively unique in many ways, but many of their struggles are also invisible to the general consciousness. Can you speak to some issues you personally encounter or encountered that others may not be aware of?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that, although I will say I'm pretty sure everybody on this panel has been through this. And I'll just say it as simply as I can. You know, we look at the appearance of who we are, what we look like to someone, and they get stuck. I'll do a quick story of actually when from being an immigrant, or, you know, my family being an immigrant and coming to the US. And then I'll do a story of actually being a woman. So the first is many decades ago, almost 3 decades ago, I went to Hawaii after I was at school at Cal at Berkeley, and I went to Hawaii. I ended up at a group kind of social gathering, and I just arrived that afternoon. So I had said, hey, you know, I just got here. What's great to do here in Hawaii? And the gentleman I was speaking with said, oh, you just got here. And I said, yeah, I just landed here this afternoon and trying to see, you know, what we could do, what's, you know, fun to do, or what are some cool things to do that are cultural in Hawaii. And his immediate thought, he said, wow, how do you speak English so good? And for a second there, I sat there and I thought, wait, what? I couldn't process what he was saying. And then I realized, oh my gosh, he thinks that I'm not from here. And so my response to him was, well, I speak English well because I'm from the US. I was actually born here. My parents are immigrants, but I was born here. And then my question was, well, how come you speak English so good? And he said, I'm from, and he told me where he was from. I just, you know, being somebody in their 20s, having that first experience for me was just very shocking, because I grew up in the Silicon Valley area where there were Asians around me. And more recently, the interesting thing is to look at how, when you look at somebody in their appearances, to be cautious and mindful and intentional that we don't put our own perceptions upon that, but to be open, to be curious and ask questions. And as recently as this month, I was introduced to a very high-level executive as the CEO of the San Diego Strikeforce, a professional football team that's here in the area. And his immediate response was, wow, what's it like to run a women's football team? And I sat there, my eyes got big, and I went, oh. And my response to him was, well, that's rather interesting. And he said, well, what's interesting? And I said, well, I don't run a women's football team, so I don't know what that's like. I only know what it's like to run a men's football team. And he turned beet red. Not, you know, it wasn't intentional to hurt me or to be hurtful in any manner. It really was just an educational opportunity for him, which I'm sure he will never, ever forget that. So speaking to those, it's just, I say the basic one is being judged for the way that we look and not being aware that we are culturally and cognitively diverse and can bring so much more to our community and leadership and to our teams.
Thank you for those stories, Vivi. They are small, short stories, and yet with so much meaning and impact behind them. At this point, I'd love to open it up to the other panelists to see if you have comments or stories or anything you want to contribute to this.
I kind of want to echo what Vivi said. Even when you are successful in the field, you get comments like, so you're the culture token or something like that. And it's like, what? I'm a culture token? Oh, so you're the diversity person in this group. And no, I came here for what I've done, not because they needed an Arab in the group. I tend to joke about it, but like it does hurt at times. Or like, oh, you're hired to bring baklava, and I said, yeah, my job is to bring baklava to the table. It's
Wow.
Cultural reduction is, yes, absolutely, to be belittled or to have your achievement not mean much because, oh, you probably were hired because of the culture thing. It happens all the time.
Yeah, and that conversation is very common right now because it happens, I think, probably just as often as the conversation about diversity, which is really a shame. Mariela or Renee?
Yes, I think we've all in this panel experienced something similar that Vivi just recently talked about. And it brought like a memory of when I was stationed in Okinawa and I was trading offices, and my boss introduced me to the team, and he was very nice. He was very excited to have me on the team. But at the end of it, he's like, oh yeah, and Mariela will make tacos. And then when I said, well, I'm not going to cook for anybody here. I'm just mostly interested in getting some work done. And that kind of put a stop to it, and everybody laughed. And it was something that then made it where I made it a little bit into a joke, but everybody understood that I wasn't going to tolerate something like that. And then it never happened again. So I think there's some things that we can do through humor and through graciousness that really has more of a deep impact on somebody when we are prepared to counteract something like that in a way that that isn't embarrassing to the other person, because then they don't feel like they're on the spot. Because I'm sure they already do, like Vivi, what you said, like that the man turned beet red, and everybody's subject to, feelings of shame, and minimizing that while still addressing the issue, I think is really important.
I agree with the panel. I'm going to echo the group. I think we all have a story similar that we can relate to. It really just is an opportunity to educate others, right? And to turn that negative into a positive experience. There is, occasions where we're discredited, right? Because of who we are. We have some highly skilled professionals here in the US, but unfortunately, it's going to require a lot more, right? To, sadly have to prove, right, their expertise and their, academia. And so there is obviously a stigma, right, and some ignorance, just not knowing and taking the time to understand. So I really just, like I shared, I like to take that negative into a positive and create a learning experience out of that, and be able to, relate and share those experiences, because it's important that not one feels any less than another because of their background or limitations here in the US. So definitely it's a growth opportunity.
Thank you so much. And to everybody for emphasizing that this is a collaborative effort. And it really is a set of responsibilities on both sides. It's very, some would say it's very generous of you to say that we want to work with and not embarrass those who are demeaning other groups. but of course it's necessary because as Mariela said, everyone is operating from a place of concern or fear or trepidation, a caution, and we really do want to work together. So I think one of the points that will help drive the playbook and other efforts like the playbook that's coming out of this, just this one question, is humility on both sides, but mostly on those who don't experience any of these things on a daily basis. Just don't assume anything. Even be careful with the jokes that you make, because they can hurt, because you have no idea what kind of history lies behind those kinds of comments. So be willing to say, I'm sorry. I mean, it's going to happen. It's going to happen to everyone. It happens to me, and I'm sure it happens to everyone. Be willing to say, I'm sorry. I want to learn. But at the same time, if you're not in a space to teach me, because it's not the job of the oppressed to educate the oppressor, I respect that as well. And I will do what I can to educate myself. We can spend a day on this topic, but we will go on to the next question. So to Mariela, what are some aspects of an immigrant's cultural life that are often overlooked as having impact on their work life?
One of the things that is really important in the Nicaraguan culture is family, and even extended family that is always, valued, like my cousins, my second cousins, my mom's cousins, my mom's aunts, and like we just have this huge family in Nicaragua that we have very close ties to. And when people think of family here in the United States, it's that singular, mom, dad, and kids, and it doesn't extend into everybody else. And so when you're thinking of, when, like, for example, for me, when I'm single, but when we had our graduation for school last year, we only got tickets for our immediate family. And we're like, well, there's people that have other families that are here that doesn't include a husband or kids. And my son couldn't make it to the graduation, but it was, if I had an uncle that was living in that area, then those kinds of things are important to take into consideration, because in our culture, like, families can be stand-ins for, your close parents or somebody else. I think that's really important to keep in mind.
Yes, thank you. And that can also impact what you bring to work, what your priorities may be regarding work.
Oh,
Vivi,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yes, definitely. Because every job that I have, when my parents come to visit and my sister comes to visit and my son comes to visit, everybody needs to get a tour of where I work. So I'm constantly parading my family around. And that's always really nice, but they just, they feel like they just want to know, they want to be part of your life, where you don't see that here in the culture here in the United States. Like, people don't bring their parents to work, except for me. Yeah.
Vivi, it looks like you want to jump in.
I can if you like. I love what the major has been saying. By the way, I do want to say something that is ubiquitous across the board for all immigrants, and the fact that she has served to keep our country safe. She has sacrificed, her family has sacrificed to be able to serve in our armed services. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I came from a family where my grandfather fought in Chiang Kai-shek's army against the communists. And we had to flee first to Taiwan, and eventually my parents were able to immigrate here, which allowed me for opportunities. I did not pay for those. I did not sacrifice for them. My family did, the major did, and her family did, and other servicemen and women have, but I did not. My freedom was paid for by them. And I am only here because I've been given those opportunities to do what I'm doing today, which I could never do if I lived in China. I'm pretty sure I couldn't do it even living in Taiwan. So I want to personally say thank you to you, Major, and to all the other servicemen and women who are on this Zoom and listening and joining us from Facebook. I am grateful for that. And every day I want to remind my players, this is not something that you should take lightly. Every day you wake up relatively free and safe in this country because of our servicemen and women. So I do want to say thank you for that. And the other is, this is a great opportunity when we understand an immigrant's cultural life. It's not just that it's a family part. It's the fact that we take family values and we bring them to our workplace, just as the Major was saying. It's creating what I call cultural diversity. When I lead my team, I lead them as if they are family. I look out for them. I am listening to what is important to them. Truly healthy dynamics in a family environment is when you listen to your children, or you listen to your husband or your spouse, your partner, and you hear them out before you make a unilateral decision. As leaders, for us, it's important to understand that cultural diversity only elevates and increases cognitive diversity. So if we're aware of that, if we're embracing that, we're only going to be better in our workplace.
Thank you so much, Vivi. And I just want to emphasize the point that you are an employer. This is not just the voice of employees speaking, but this is why diverse voices in every pool makes things better for companies, for teams, for anything, any entity that wants to prosper. Renee or Rasha? Rasha? Oh.
I wanted to bring the conversation back to your question. Being an Arab American or a Muslim American, the culture is, you have two strikes against you, because here there is separation between the culture and religion. But in Arab culture and in Islam, there isn't. The culture the religion play a major crucial role in the culture, and that affects the way immigrant and refugee can integrate into society. It's almost like they have hurdles just because of who they are and what they believe in. And, you know, as Arab American, you know, or Muslim American in general, I want to say there is hesitancy about hiring them. There is, you know, a lot of other things that goes into this, and I see it now with Afghan refugees as well. It's not easy for them just because the culture has the major religion as a component. It's you know, there is more obstacle just because of who they are.
That's a very good point to bring up, because if we want to be able to take advantage of all the talents and strength that these populations bring to the American workforce, we need to have our eyes open and have our be willing to incorporate and accommodate. I'm not even sure accommodate is the right word, but incorporate these values into our.
Like you mentioned how the immigrant have businesses. This is one way they escape from trying to find jobs in the workforce. Let's use our talent in a business, because they're not employable the way other immigrants are employable, you know.
Very good point. Thank you. Renee?
No, I agree with Dr. Rasha. I think understandably, you know, immigrants are going to face a lot of challenges, right? You know, there are many barriers, you know, they're, you know, crossing over, you know, resettling with very traumatic experiences. You know, there are families involved, there's family loss, and then having to, you know, almost start over, right? Depending on, you know, your age group, the resources that are available to you, your support system, all of those are going to carry weight. I think it's important to work with our teams, I too as an employer, to help and understand these different communities. They are very much united. And so it's rather than having to, ignore or pretend, that this isn't happening. Understand and embrace and learn and identify opportunities to work together, to understand different cultures and diversity, and really focus on the strengths of those individuals rather than having to fight this. I think it's just what our world is. And so we, have to take that opportunity to really come together and make it as one. And so it's up to us as, former immigrants, as leads in our communities, to really help one another and to, take it upon ourselves, right, to get more involved, get more folks engaged, and, really, get comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? So that we can have some meaningful, opportunities and conversations, and to create new opportunities for those that follow.
Thank you, Renee. My next question kind of expands on what you were saying, and also, Rasha, what you were beginning to touch on. Can you shed some light or share some examples about employers maybe, or employment situations that have worked with the experiences of immigrants and refugee communities and made it work? I'm not sure if I asked that question right, so let me know if you need clarification.
I'll go if it's okay. We actually just recently, I organized our first refugee job fair, hosted by our Grossmont College, serving our district community-wide. We were anticipating somewhere around 20 employers to show. Surprisingly, we had around 45 employers in-house. It just shows you the need, right? Knowing that this is a refugee-focused event, an employment workforce opportunity. There was definitely lots of interest with our employers in our San Diego County to come out and table and build awareness and, meet some of our, refugees, our immigrants, and share those prospects with them. So, we're quick to assume that, no one is interested, right? But you would be pleasantly surprised to know that there are lots of employers and not only educators, but, workforce leaders who want to take on. Some of my best teammates are our international students, our refugee students. Their work ethic is very strong. They're very humble and appreciative of opportunities here in the U.S. And, for those with, who are limited English speaking, there are opportunities for them as well. We forget that, our behind the scene friends, right? The ones who are the movers and shakers of some of these opportunities, of these business establishments. So, we had lots of media out. There was a lot of interest. We worked collectively as a community to make this a success. This stemmed from our San Diego Refugee Forum. And I am one of the co-chairs for our employment task force among, our other team members. And so it was really a collective effort, but it was beautiful to see, how meaningful this engagement was and such high interest.
I think foreign students are a little different than immigrant and refugee, though, because employers recognize that they have specific skills and they know that they can absolutely benefit from that. But when you have a refugee or an immigrant, especially with lack of English proficiency, then we can't all be security guards. They're willing to give them the job that's low paying and keep them in that hamster wheel. And that's a vicious cycle of you become poor and you live as poor, and that's it, right? How many employers are willing to invest in special training for the refugees to increase their language skills, to get them move up? Yes, they will hire them but are they going to invest in them? That's where I see the problem.
Yeah, very good point. That investment piece is absolutely critical. Mariela or Vivi, can you speak to this in your respective fields?
I can jump in here. So the military, when I joined the Marine Corps, I'd only been in the United States for about 10 years. And my English wasn't great when I went to boot camp at 19. And after I got out of boot camp, then I was able to, access resources to learn English on base education center and get my citizenship through the military. After I served in Iraq, I was able to fast track my citizenship and become a full citizen. So then I could apply to go to officer candidate school so I could continue to improve myself. I went to school using the GI Bill. And so the military, I think in this respect, is an example because they have so many programs that encourage young immigrants to go to school. And then it's this program called the MESEP program where you can apply and they can help you get into college. And then they'll pay for your college. So then you can go to officer candidate school and become an officer in the military. And there's a lot of support that comes with that. And you see so many stories of success.
The military is not a measure, though. They're providing this benefit for everyone who's willing to wear a uniform, right? The development and the investment in the people as a government job, it's not a business worrying about the bottom line, right? So it's a little, the analogy is, a little bit different. Renee, I'm interested in your opinion.
I'm sorry?
I was saying, Renee, I'm interested in your opinion since you've been help hire refugees and immigrants.
Yeah, you know what? It is true. It's very competitive. It's competitive, for everyone across. I think what it is going back to your point about investment. We're doing a lot through our district to support students, to lead them with self-sufficiency. So working closely with our community partners, our resources that are available that are, students, who are taking advantage of or being part of a program, specifically partnering with them so that it's a success on both ends. So, when we have a newly resettled refugee, we're going to work with those community partners, right? Many of them are our students, but they're also recipients of these programs. So knowing that these individuals need to be working, we're doing lots of opportunities in training, right? Everything from soft skills. So not only making sure that, English is strong, but being accustomed to, traditional ways, right? US ways of thinking, of working, of managing. So it's really important that, they understand our 21st century skills. So things, like customer service, right? It's going to vary here than their, native country. Time management, right? We have lots of responsibilities and things, but how can we further support our professionals, right? So that they are prepared for, the world of work, and diversity and just so many topics that, we touch on. So I bring on speakers who have the background, but also can assist in translating and doing that interpretation. So we're doing that early on. We're going out into the classrooms, working closely with the community so that we are not just referring them, right? And it can be very scary. It can be scary for us, but they are feeling confident and prepared before meeting with that employer. And then we are also doing lots of checking in with their supervisors, making sure that, students are showing up to work, that they understand the assignment, There are checkpoints, that they're meeting expectations. So it really becomes a very collaborative partnership. And we start with small groups who we feel are prepared and are ready for that next step.
Thank you. And I think what Mariela and Renee are highlighting really well is the fact that there are resources out there, depending on what direction you want to go into. And to Rasha's point, I think our goal needs to be, as a community, how do we get those resources to the people who need them in the ways that they need them? So obviously, if you wanted to go through the military route, there are so many opportunities there while you're there and then afterwards. For schooling and GI Bills and things like that. And then community colleges, obviously tons of resources. And there are also a number of nonprofits and associations that offer these types of services. So then the larger question has to be, how do we make sure, as I said earlier, how do we make sure the people who need them get them? Vivi, I'm curious if this plays out in the sports world at all.
Well, it's sports world has been pretty traditional. For me to even break in as a leader is very non-traditional, and it's been hard for a lot of the guys who have been in these positions for 20, 30, 40 years. You think about it, these coaches do not deal with women, let alone an Asian American minority woman. So when they're trying to communicate with me, they are lost. They don't know how to communicate. I look at what all the organizations that are doing and what they're doing well as best practices to implement programs for us. We launched last year the first Strikeforce Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization specifically created for education. We're looking at creating programs or supporting programs and offering scholarships, not just for children, but for professional development. For development of those who want to break into this industry. I actually just got an email from somebody who wants to be able to place overseas immigrants into the sports industry here in San Diego. I was thrilled to get it, because it's an opportunity for them to understand the American football culture, which is really a part of our history and our culture here. And I get to be able to bring them in with a different, again, going back to that cultural and cognitive diversity, and bring them into different ways to be able to work in football, sports, and entertainment. On July 9th, we're going to be having a dialogue, inviting the NFL and other women's sports entertainment leaders to speak to the fact that we need more of this cognitive diversity. Billie Jean King was the one who inspired me to be able to take this role. Never occurred to me to do this. So whether we do it through formal programs or we're mentoring one another and being able to elevate immigrants and also this cultural diversity into the various industries, those of us who are leaders need to make intentional choices to embrace that. And we're at all different levels, and there's no right or wrong in it. There's no one way or all way, we have to do it this way or not at all. The bottom line is, if we're open to being able to embrace those best practices and bring them into our organizations, we can only win. That's the only way we're going to see this change throughout our culture and our communities.
Thank you so much. My questions are starting to blur all together. They look nice and clear as questions, but obviously when you bring the conversation into a real forum, the answers just all start to turn into one massive discussion. I'm just going to throw out this question because I know, to all of you, because I know you all probably have strong opinions about this. You're all in your own worlds familiar with who's at the table, who's having these conversations. What stakeholder groups do you see are working effectively together right now to support the interests of employed refugees in their communities, and who else needs to be at the table? And Renee, I know I skipped a question to you about the career trajectory of immigrant students, but feel free to incorporate that into any part of your answer if you want to as well.
Sure, absolutely. So in San Diego, specifically in East County, we have obviously an influx of refugees resettling in our communities. So with the rise of refugees, we have many resources and support to again lead refugees to self-sufficiency. So some of the groups that I work closely with and those stakeholders is really, again, our San Diego Refugee Forum, only because we have several subgroups, including our homeless task force and employment task force, who works closely to create, those engagements, right, for refugee specific. However, everyone is welcome. Another group is our Welcome Newcomers network. Again, these are all leaders within our community who play a big role in serving our refugees, whether it's in education or social services. And then, of course, our El Cajon Collaborative. So we have, many organizations joining these conversations on a monthly, and really, discussing, what some of the new challenges are, how many arrivals we can expect, where they're resettling, what are some of the resources or things that we maybe need to reimagine to further support, these individuals. Because again, they come with, a ton of barriers. We are really just working hard collectively to, and also for us, I can only speak, as to what we're doing at the college is, we have categorical programs. So our CalWorks office, for example, and our EOPS, our extended opportunities really work closely. Our counselors do a phenomenal job with working one-on-one, but we also offer group settings, right? They all come with, different scenarios. And so depending on their support system and their resources, that will determine, their success rate, right? For any of us, we need those advocates, we need those mentors and cheerleaders to really, push us and provide guidance. For some of these families, they might be on their own, right? So I can't imagine, having to move to a whole nother country and start all over with, a limited, language or, English, or depending on where. So really just breaking those barriers as much as we can, working closely, identifying the needs, everything from food insecurities to housing, to obviously workforce. So in my area specifically, we've been able to design some innovative practices, things such as our Day in the Life series, where I bring on guest professionals, some who were former immigrants and refugees, to talk and speak on not only their success and what they're doing now, but to take us back and to talk to us about some of the challenges they faced and some of those barriers, and who was impactful in their life, right? And who supported them along the way. And doesn't necessarily have to be family, but what are some of those organizations or groups that really made a difference in their life? And what was that process like? So it's important to share not only the success and all the great things that are happening now, but who supported you along the way. And of course, we offer different opportunities to have professionals share their occupations, their backgrounds, and then we do those in a one-on-one setting and group settings as well. One thing I do want to stress as well is the pandemic has also very much created additional barriers for all of us, but more so for our immigrants, and especially towards employment. Many unfortunately are unemployed, they face job loss, less stable employment. So it definitely interrupted, their career paths and further opportunities for advancement, right? Technology plays a big factor as well. And so not having those reliable resources can definitely hinder those opportunities.
Thank you so much. It's a very comprehensive list, and it's really wonderful to know that all these different groups are working together. And it does take a village. And so I think part of that is messaging to the employers, which is, as Rasha was saying, we know that you are consumed with, making your company run right. And you don't necessarily have the time or even the awareness to make the effort in directions that could improve your prosperity, but won't if you can't take advantage of all the talent that's out there. Rasha, do you have any thoughts on who else should be at the table?
Refugee advocate, somebody who works with refugee, who see them when they get fired, or that's the type of thing when they go to different interviews, you see the impact. I see, because, okay, Renee, maybe you can answer this question. The second generation, so when the refugee comes with children, they're the one who becomes student at Grossmont. They're the one who have job opportunity. But what about the father, the refugee himself who came? They don't have that opportunity. So it's also the age. Are we gonna just say it's okay for refugees, their kids will be successful? How about the refugees themselves? They don't have the luxury of becoming students. They get their welcome money, it ends. They need to start paying for the rent. How can they have a career? And especially if they had a career there that cannot be translated. There is additional hurdles with somebody who's starting over, and it's all good to say when they do this, they do that, but those are the second generation. Those are not the refugees themselves. They don't have the luxury of becoming student. Very few and far between who actually go that route.
And I appreciate that, Dr. Russian, and then I agree, again, it's going to vary from one refugee student and family to another. They do have an increased, number of responsibilities. Entrepreneurship is definitely an attractive path for many refugees as they are supporting and providing for their families, sometimes running, the family business or what have you. And so, some of the parents end up taking on, entry-level jobs while their children are studying. And so, many that are just require a high school diploma or an equivalent, they start working the hospitality sector, things such as, waiters and bartenders or housekeepers, very little where it's customer facing, right? And so, those are opportunities that are going to be less earning. And they do rely on their children to be, the breadwinners or the sole providers or interpreters or whatever have you. But, really trying to create short-term training opportunities to get them those skill sets and then off to, meaningful and gainful employment for those families. But it definitely, it starts slow, and we have to start, towards the bottom and work towards, those opportunities so that they are having success in those positions.
Yeah, obviously fodder for very, very deep conversation. And I thank you all for bringing these issues forward, because they are things that need to come into the playbook discussion when we do work together as a community to address people at all stages in their lives. I'm going to turn the questioning to Mariela for a moment here. As an immigrant Latina, what are some issues and experiences that you feel people should be aware of? We did have a comment in the from the audience saying, I'm an Mexican American, in this particular case, LGBTQ. At my work, they discriminate against us. Do you have thoughts, comments you want to share about being a Latina immigrant in the military, female?
Thank you, Hei-ock. Before I answer that question, I wanted to offer up that some of the organizations that you could have joined to have this conversation would be like the Chamber of Commerce Or I remember my parents taking us to like the Nicaraguan Alliance, and the whole point of these community groups are to help people find jobs and get a step up in life. When we first came to the US, my dad was an engineer in Nicaragua, and he was a civil engineer. And then when we first came here, for years and years, he worked as a janitor while he improved on his English. And going to these different community groups, then he was able to find an opportunity at a bank. And then at the bank, then he worked himself up to eventually working for the Bank of Paris in San Francisco as a VP for computer development programs and stuff. And that's where he retired from. But the local community associations are very helpful to enable that first generation, that first immigrant to come in and find a different job. My experience being a Latino woman in the military, especially as a major in the Marine Corps now that we call ourselves, we're considered field grade officers. So we're pretty senior in rank. And when you're sitting around the table, then you look around, and I'm always the only minority woman in the room if there's another woman in the room, which is at this job, there's a lot of women in my position now, but in previous, I'm always just the only woman in whatever meeting I'm in. And so there's, I think, a feeling of responsibility that you're representing all women in the military at every meeting that you go to. So you have to be extremely prepared. You have to be competent at all times. And that feeling of pressure is always on. And that really just never lets up, because if you make one mistake, it feels very amplified, at least to me, that I a lot of the times, and I grew up this way, is that I just don't feel that I can make any mistakes, because I don't think that they're forgiven, right? In a lot of ways. And so I'm the hardest person on myself when I make mistakes. And that's, that's very wearing. And it causes a lot of time because of preparation. You over prepare, and sometimes it's just not necessary. But it's something that I've had to deal with my entire career, where now that, after 20 something years in the military, you think you have enough experience, but because you're only one of one, there's an immense pressure to perform and perform well, because you're representing the people that are coming after you. One of the unique things about the Marine Corps is that our enlisted service members, I think the Hispanic population is more than 20%, I believe, which is the largest out of all the services. And then, but the officer corps is still very, very, very small when it comes to minorities. So it's even more amplified. Like when I go to a meeting or give a brief, then I feel like I cannot make mistakes, because I want the Marines to be proud of me, and that I take a lot of pride in that. So.
Thank you. And there is an entrenched cultural pressure on females.
Yes.
Studies show that even in school, girls are punished for getting something wrong, and boys are encouraged to take risks. This comes from the teachers. This is part of our culture. So on top of all the pressures that you put on yourself, society helps by adding more pressure. Vivi,
Exactly.
you are the first of many things in your career. I bet you have some. I mean, you've already shared some stories, but I would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, Hei-ock, I've talked to you about this before, which is where I'm entering into an environment where they don't have women bosses. And these coaches never work for a woman, or they don't work for strong women, and certainly not minority women. And to have me come in and run a football team is completely foreign to them. And in some cases, they don't always make very good decisions. The major's right. We put a lot on ourselves to want to get it right, but we have to remember too that we're human and we're going to make mistakes. We learn from our mistakes, whether we're male or female, it doesn't matter. We're still learning from any mistakes that we make. It's just in the workplace, a man is more likely to get latitude to make those mistakes. And the communication with them is, oh, he's leading us and he's doing the best he can and it's okay. We can get through it together. I don't get that latitude. Generally, I get a lot of, oh, you're my mom. No, man, I'm not your mom. I'm not in this role to be your mother. I'm not in this role to be your sister, your aunt, or your grandma. And that's typically what they expect out of me. She's compassionate, she's sweet, she's nurturing. And what we need to do in our workplaces is actually start to train the work environment to understand that, yes, we are nurturing, but we're also very strong and we can deal with direct communication and we can make those hard decisions and we can address the hard truths. We don't need to be coddled, and we're not going to spend time in our work environment to coddle you either. And that is very jarring for men who have not dealt with a woman in that manner. They don't know how to deal with a woman who makes the hard call, who makes a business decision. And more often than not, they quit. I've seen a lot of men quit and walk away from this organization because they can't handle a strong woman who makes a decision for her business, for the organization, and for the community. I'm not making decisions to coddle your feelings. I'm making decisions to look at an overall business that has to succeed for this community. And it is hard. You put it on yourself because we are human at the end of the day, and I have emotions about it. But I am confident that I'm in this position, as Dr. Rasha said, because I'm capable. I'm able to do this job. It's not because of how I look or my race or my gender. I've earned every minute of every success that I've achieved because I've worked for it and I've prepared for it. I never went out to be the first in anything. What I did do was look ahead. I realized that there needs to be good leadership. It didn't matter whether I'm a woman or a minority woman or an Asian American person. What mattered was I looked at it and said, can I do this? Can I prepare our community to re-enter after a post-pandemic, in a post-pandemic era? That's what I looked at. How do we make fans comfortable and safe? How do we make them feel like they can come back to a football game? How do I take a look at the fact that 50% of fans for football are women and represent that? I'm not looking at tradition necessarily. I want to make sure that what I do in the tradition of football, elevate and bring in the community in different ways and embrace them in any way. So, I appreciate that you'll always, whether or not we like it or not, when we're choosing to do something different, when we're choosing to innovate, you are going to face discrimination. You're going to face challenges. And that's what I remind myself every day. If I'm going to do something different, I'm going to face challenges and I will embrace them. But what I will do too is educate those who are in front of me. It may not be something I feel like I have to do, but I want to do it now because I realize if I don't do it, nothing will change. And those who don't want to embrace it, they will weed themselves out and they will quit, just like the guys I've seen before me quit.
Thank you so much, Vivi, for that inspiring. I'm not even sure what to call it. It's for those inspiring words and sentiments and sharing your experiences. There's so much rich material here that I'm just going to take us right up to my closing sentence. And Rasha, if I could ask you the last question. Well, actually, it's related, but if you could just spend a minute, sorry to keep it short, but I'm very curious to see how this kind of personal evolution plays out in the communities with which you work.
To summarize it in one sentence, I
I know
think
it's impossible.
we should meet people where they are. We should look at their strengths and help them get there. There is one program I have in my nonprofit where we give women sewing machine because that's a skill that they knew back home, and have them start their own small business and start sewing and tailoring. we have to meet people where they are. They still have language programs. They still have language that they need to work on, their proficiencies. They still have to have cultural hurdles. But let's focus on the strengths versus the weakness, and try to promote them, highlight their strengths and what they can bring to the table.
Absolutely. I love that. And I will say that one of the Kim Center's sort of informal goals is for women to be accepted as they are. There are powerful women, just like there are powerful people, and there are women who really just want to get up, do their lives, and then go to sleep, and then, you know, be with their families and whatever. Whether you choose to be a working mom or a stay-at-home mom or a CEO or a seamstress, whatever it is, you should be allowed to choose and not be judged and not be diminished for who you are. And I thank you all so much for helping to bring even a slice of that perspective to this conversation, and aligning, you know, with the Kim Center. I mean, we're honored to align with you and your work, and I hope the community looks forward to everything that we're going to produce and change together. Thanks so much to our participants for generously sharing your time and your insights. And thanks to our audience for joining us for this episode of Uniting for Workplace Equity. We hope you'll like and share this post and add your questions and your thoughts in the comments. Please join us on the third Tuesday of next month, where we do part 3 of immigrant and refugee workers in the US workplace, or equity for immigrant and refugee workers. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.